Welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining me again on Talk of the Town, your Ipswich Town podcast. And as you can see, for those already watching on YouTube, you can already see what's ahead. We have a special guest this morning, this evening, or this afternoon, whenever you're watching this. It's, of course, ex-Town player Alex Bruce, who will be joining us. Before we do get into the podcast, you can listen to it on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. In fact, any podcasting software that you normally would find your podcast, just search Talk of the Town, your Ipswich Town FC podcast. A quick disclaimer for those that jump into the comments and say, why didn't you ask this? Why didn't we say this? This will be a recap, if you like, before we sit down, hopefully with Alex in the future for a more in-depth face-to-face podcast. This is new technology. We're in a pandemic, so we don't want to overstress the internet and go too far into what is a fantastic career. So, Alex, thank you for joining me. How are we? How are we?
I'm good, thanks. Holding up relatively okay. Obviously, tough time for everyone at the moment, being stuck indoors. But no, it's been all right. My garden's looking not too bad at the minute. It's been spending a lot of time in the garden with the kids. But yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks.
Brilliant. And when we talked on the phone a couple of days ago, you were just starting a home learning with your children. How is being teacher going?
Thankfully, I've got the little one. I've got two little girls, Ava and Betsy. So I'm doing the younger one, who's only 5. So
brilliant.
I'm doing that, doing the older one. So thankfully, I've got the easier task. But I'll be doing that straight after this. So yeah, got all that to look forward to.
Well, we can't keep you too long then, because obviously education is important, and we can't keep it waiting too long. So we'll jump straight in, if that's okay.
Yep.
I thought we'd put up a wiki true or a wiki false. I saw this somewhere, and I can't remember for the life of me where I saw this type of thing done. So if the person who's originally come up with it is watching, apologies for not shouting you out. Let me know in the comment section, and I will then, of course, moving forward, make sure I give you the full credit as you deserve. But according to Wikipedia, which is obviously very famous for its clangers, your middle name is Stephen.
Yeah.
Bang, we're straight off the gate. They got that one right.
Yeah.
Your date of birth is the 28th September 1984.
Correct.
But we won't say where, okay? We won't say where. All right?
No, not doing
No. Well, we can forgive occasional moves into Norfolk, but we won't go too far. You joined the United Academy, but was released at age 16 and moved to Blackburn as a trainee.
That's correct, yes. I was there. I was at Man United I joined Man United, I think it was 10-year-old, and then, I got released when I was 16 and went to Blackburn.
So what was that like, obviously being released by United, having had a dad that famously played for the club? Did Ferguson speak to you? Did you see Ferguson around that time?
I seen him. Obviously, he was the manager, but my dealings were mainly with the academy staff and youth team managers really back then. But it was a really, really big disappointment looking back. It was probably as upset as I've ever been in my life. Obviously, growing up as a Man United fan and following Dad to Man United and being there, I just thought it would be an easy ride. Really, I thought I would be there. I knew all the staff, obviously, from the connection I had at Manchester, and I just thought I would coast through, go through the youth teams, make my way into the reserves and find my way into the first team. That's just what I thought in my mind. And then to get that rejection at 16, and I think I was the only one out of our squad rejected as well, which was a real disappointment.
Wow.
But looking back now, it gave me an insight that football's not all a case of doing this. Do you know what I mean? There's a few of these as well. And I learnt that early doors, and that rejection, probably looking back now, put the fire in my belly to really go and prove them wrong. And I had a burning desire to go to Blackburn and try and make a name for myself and become a professional. And thankfully I did that.
Absolutely. And did your dad, obviously Steve, the famous Steve Bruce, did he speak to you around that time and pick you up and give you any words of advice? Or
Yeah, he was there. He came to the meeting. I remember it. We got called to Carrington. Everyone had 10-minute slots, a little bit like a parents' evening, really, at school, if you can imagine. We were all sat waiting and watched all my mates going in and coming out delighted. And I remember a couple of my mates went in, and my dad looked at me and went, "If they're all right, you'll be fine, son," blah, blah, blah. ended up going in and getting released. So to walk back through them all as a 16-year-old and say goodbye to all my mates who I'd played with for 6-7 years was really tough at the time, looking back for a young kid as well. I was only 16. I was 15 actually. And then had the prospect of leaving and then finding a new club, leaving home. The training ground at Man United was only 10 minutes away from my house. So I had that prospect of all of a sudden thinking, Christ, I've got to leave home now and go into gigs, and probably made me a man looking back.
And obviously we're now approaching, especially with this pandemic, where players are going to be released from football clubs. Having had that experience and having now had the career that you've had, a fantastic career, FA Cup finalist, what would you say to those that are being released at the time, at this time?
Never ever think it's the end of the road, especially if you're at a good age, because rejection's only one person's opinion sometimes, maybe a couple of people's opinions. And football's all about opinions. One manager might not like you, one coach might not like you, but there's another one around the corner who might love you. So I think that's just a huge case of the game. It is about opinions. And if I was going to give advice to anybody, being a footballer is a roller coaster of emotions. When you've got a good time, there's always a bad time lingering around the corner, and you've just got to ride it out and go through the good times and the bad, and try and not let the bad affect you too much. And also the good times, don't let them affect you too much. Don't let that go to your head either. Just try and keep an even keel, and most of the time you'll be all right. Yeah,
I live as a fan with a philosophy of, after a win, it's never as good as you feel it is at that moment, and after a defeat, it's never as bad as you feel at that moment.
Exactly, and you feel like that as a player as well. Sometimes when you get beat, you drive home in your car and you feel like your world's ended. You especially if you had a bad game, but as you say, in the grand scheme of things, it's not always as bad as you think.
So Wikipedia has Bruce coming on as a substitute for Birmingham against Liverpool in a game that they were heavily beaten. Is that true? Do you remember it? Do you remember it?
I remember it well. We were getting beat. I think it was 6-0. I was on the bench. Sorry, my doorbell's going there. I don't know if you heard that. We were getting beat 6-0, and Mario Melchiot, the right back, tried a back heel from the halfway line back to the goalkeeper, and my dad wasn't impressed by it. Turned around, going on, and I remember looking at him going, "Are you sure? You sure you want to put me on 6-0 down? You're getting pelters as it is. When you see me putting me on as well, we're going to get slaughtered." And yeah, we did do that night. That was one of those horrible nights, but yeah, not a good memory.
Yeah, and I bet it wasn't. And I had Ian Marshall on my podcast a couple of months ago, and he was famously brought on for the Ipswich Town 9-0 defeat against Manchester United, and he was. Yeah, but he said the exact same thing. When George turned to him and said, "You're going on," he said, "You sure? Really?" He was almost hiding. Bruce and Kasper Schmeichel are childhood friends.
Yes, I've never been able to shake him off. He lives just around the corner from me, and our kids are actually in the same class now.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, so I see him all the time. But he was my next door neighbour as a kid growing up. So my childhood was me and Kasper out in the street belting a ball while I was belting a ball at him, and he was diving around like a lunatic. So
you made him the goalkeeper he is today?
I'm not sure about that, but I certainly got a good bit of practice in with him. That was, as I say, that was our childhood. It was jumpers for goalposts, as it were, and he had the gloves on and diving around the street where we lived, and that was it. Straight after school, and we were kids. And that was our childhood. Looking back, it was pretty simple, really.
So, what was it like for you watching that Leicester magical run with Kasper between the sticks?
Oh, he's gone on and had a great career. I mean, he went on to we went our separate ways, and obviously we moved from the area, and so did he. So we didn't see each other for a couple of years. And then our paths crossed again when I left Ipswich and signed for Leeds. He was the goalkeeper.
He was, yeah.
He went to Leicester, and obviously to see him go there and achieve what he's done, winning the Premier League, and he's turned into a fantastic keeper. And fair play to him, he's done really well.
That's Wikipedia, so they've done pretty well. Wikipedia, who was doing your page?
Yeah, they were all correct.
Is doing pretty well. This was the quick fire round. This is 2-touch pass and move. Don't think about it too much. Netflix or Amazon Prime?
Netflix.
Anything good at the moment on Netflix that you're watching?
It's not on Netflix, but me and the wife have just watched the great series, Gangs of London. Really enjoyed it. If you've not seen it, it's brilliant. Bit gory, bit gruesome, but very good.
Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah,
It was on Sky.
Sorry.
It was on Sky Atlantic.
Yeah, I've seen the first episode. Wasn't overly keen on it. I'm a big Sopranos fan, and I don't know if I was expecting sort of Sopranos. And
You set the bar high there.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Chinese or curry?
Chinese.
And what's the dish you go for?
I like a lot of things really. Probably a bit. I like the dim sums, the shumais, the har cows, things like that. Bit of sweet and sour chicken.
Good man. Good.
Yeah.
Man. And if you're in the doghouse with the good Lucy, what is your go-to recipe? What do you do in the kitchen to impress her?
Oh, do you know what? I'm really not good in the kitchen at all. I do quite a good lamb casserole, but I haven't done it for quite a while.
Nice. Okay. Robbie or Roy Keane?
Roy Keane.
Heads and volleys or Wembley doubles?
Heads and volleys.
Yeah. Did you and Kasper used to play heads and volleys?
Yeah. I used to use the front gardens where I used to live in the estate, and that I'd do my heads and my overhead kicks on the on the grass, because doing it on the concrete would have been a bit dangerous. I
can't remember seeing many of those for you at Portman Road.
No, they didn't. They didn't come out the locker really when I was a professional. The overhead kicks stayed firmly in the locker when I was a kid.
4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, or other?
4-4-2.
Yeah, and central midfield or centre of defence?
Central defence.
Yeah, you could play both, couldn't you?
Yeah, I played quite a lot for. I think I made my debut for Ipswich actually, centre midfield.
You did, yeah.
Played quite a lot of games for Hull in centre midfield, especially away from home, ugly places where we went a bit more defensive, like the Millwalls away and Burnley away. Games like that where we shut up shop a little bit and played that central midfield defensive role.
What is the worst?
Always my favourite position.
What was the worst place you've ever played at? Mentioning Millwall there. What is the worst place where you went and you really just didn't enjoy it?
Do you know one place where I've always had a beast there, and it was St Mary's. It sat down at Southampton. Never won there. Always had a nightmare. And the last time I played there was in the Premier League for Hull. Broke my nose. The big Italian centre forward, big good-looking fella. What's he called? Graziano Pelleri, I think he was called. He broke my nose early doors in the game, and then I brought down Shane, gave a penalty away. So Southampton away was always one that I used to think that never really played well there.
And as a player, when you're heading into a fixture where you're going somewhere like that, does that start to play in the back of your mind?
Well, when you've had 3 or 4 beasts at that ground, yeah, it does. I think every player got them, to be honest. There's one ground where you always don't play well, or we always get beat there. And, unfortunately, Southampton was that ground for me.
Brilliant. So 4 years at Ipswich, making 126 appearances and 3 goals. And I remember each goal like it was yesterday. And you appeared twice for Ireland and twice for Northern Ireland. So if we start with those Irish caps first, when did you first know that you were being tracked or watched by Ireland?
I was at Ipswich, and my gran, who's obviously no longer with us now, unfortunately, she was from Belfast. And Charlie rang me, who was the, I don't really know what title Charlie had really, around the training ground when Jim Magilton was manager. And he just pulled me one day, and he had a connect. He was close to Bobby Robson. And I think Bobby Robson was like a general manager to Steve Staunton. He was just upstairs really. And Charlie had a conversation with Bobby, and it spoke about my Irish roots. And Charlie pulled me one day and said, "Just keep doing what you're doing, because the Irish lot are looking at you." And I spoke to Steve Staunton and spoke to Bobby, and you might be in the next squad. And thankfully, the next squad was announced a couple of weeks later, and I was in it. So that was the first time. And I had some great memories, really, looking back. It was really enjoyable. Unfortunately, I didn't play as well as much as I wanted to, because I had big competition at the time with people like Richard Dunn, John O'Shea, good centre-halves who were there at the time. So I sat on the bench quite a lot of the games, but I got in a couple. I think I made I think I'd made a few caps for them, but they were all in friendlies for the Republic. Hence why further down the line I got the opportunity to switch allegiances and go and try and get a few more caps for Northern Ireland, because I thought I would play a bit more.
So what was it like joining up with both sets of squads for the first time? Was it nervous? Was it excitement? A bit of both? It
was quite nervous. I was nervous really because I was only young when I first went to join up with the Republic, and we met up at a place called the Portman Golf Links, and there were some big names in that squad at the time. Looking back, like Roy Keane, you've just mentioned, Shay Givens, Richard Duns, John O'Shea's, Damien Duffs, Kevin Kilbans. There were some really good players, big characters in that squad. And the memories that I remember and really good times looking back.
Who was your roommate?
I had a few different ones. Who did I room with most of the time when I was with Ireland? I remember rooming with Shane Long, Andy Keogh. He was a centre forward from rival of mine. He was at Wolves for a bit and places like that.
Who was the worst roommate?
The worst roommate in my career or with Ireland?
With Ireland. So when you got to Ireland, you were told your rooms and you were, oh no.
Do you know what? I didn't really have one because they were all right. I never really had any really bad roommates. Talking 10, 12 years ago now, so it's difficult to remember the ones that I had. But no, I was quite lucky really. I didn't really have any bad ones. Is
there any stories from those times that you look back on and you can think, oh, do you know what? I can't believe that happened, or because.
Oh yeah, there was. I mean, I just caught the back end of the going out culture really with the Irish lot, and it was quite kind of encouraged to go and have a couple of beers, and I caught the real back end of it. It wasn't until Trapattoni came in and took Steve Staunton's job where it changed a little bit. But yeah, you'd meet up on a Saturday or a Sunday, and you'd be down the drain pipes and going out and for a few drinks, and then straight after a game you would go out. And there was a few Thursday mornings where I used to travel back from Ireland to meet up with the Ipswich squad again. I remember Jim Magilton used to look at me a couple of times. Typical Irish few days. I was here. You've been on the Guinness. I think he could tell. I was in training a couple of times, but yeah, good times.
Could you take a few pints and handle them, or was there other people who would really sink them and put you on the table?
As I got older, definitely not. But when I was young, when I was in my Ipswich days, I was all right. I could go and have a night out, and it wouldn't affect me at all, to be honest. But obviously, as you get older, then, as everyone will tell you, it changes. Your body changes, and it takes that little bit longer to recover.
Certainly does. And obviously now football's changed from ahead of a lot, and it's less not less done, but it's maybe frowned upon a bit more. Maybe I don't know.
100%. And I noticed a big difference from when I first started. Obviously, it wasn't that long ago, but when I first started playing compared to what it is now, it's totally different.
So 126 games for Ipswich, 3 goals. First, those goals, do you remember them?
My first goal for Ipswich, was it Birmingham away?
Correct.
Yeah.
Header.
Yeah, header. Do you know what? I should have scored more, really. I had a lot of opportunities. I remember at the time when I was at Ipswich, people used to say, bloody hell, Bruce, any chance you chipping in with a few more goals? You always have a near miss, or you hit a post or a bar or whatever. But it's a bit of a disappointing goal ratio, really, to be honest.
Yeah, but which was your best of the 3, do you think? Because you had Birmingham header, you had a Preston header, and the goal at Chelsea.
The goal at Chelsea was a great experience for myself. We got beat on the day, but it was the equaliser, and I remember just the ball bobbled nicely to me on the edge of the 6-yard box, and I could tuck it away, but it was right in front of the Ipswich supporters behind the goal.
Yeah,
and that was a lovely experience for myself at the time, and one that I look back on with good memories. Yeah,
likewise. I've got to be honest. You say about the back end of the drinking culture. That for me it was between my 16th and 19th, sort of the time where you're a football fan. You start going home and away. You start getting the beers, and that was one of my best ever away days. I've got to be honest, because we equalised. You were right in front of us, and then you ran away. The passion in your face. I was ballistic with it, and as I said before we started, one of my favourite players. So to see you put it away. And then the passion was just tremendous. Obviously,
well, that's one thing that I look back on, especially with Ipswich, where I had such a good relationship with the supporters. The supporters were great with me. They used to sing my name, I don't think throughout my career anyway, I don't think I had a relationship with any supporters like the ones that I had with Ipswich. They seem to take to me, and whenever I get asked about my time at Ipswich, I say great club, really enjoyed it, and blah, 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 look back, really fond memories. But the one thing I always say was the supporters were always fantastic with me, and they were.
Yeah, we loved you. I absolutely loved you. I know we did with the famous Bruce chant. Very imaginative, but it worked.
I know.
It worked.
Was pretty original, to say the least.
But obviously, that Chelsea game wasn't a great result in the end, with Michael Ballack proving he is one of the best free kick takers in the world. Buried two in the absolute top stanchion right in front of us. But you were one of Jim's first signings as manager, and you were debuted against Crystal Palace. You played in midfield. You instantly become a fan favourite, I think, because of your hard tackling, your no nonsense, and desire to win the ball. When did you become aware of Ipswich's interest in you?
Well, obviously, I was at Blackburn as a kid, and then I went out on loan a couple of times. I went to Sheffield Wednesday. Well, I went to Oldham first, then went to Sheffield Wednesday. Got promoted from League One with Sheffield Wednesday. I was only there on a 3-month loan. And during that time, my dad signed me. I got put as part of the Robbie Savage deal, where he went from Birmingham to Blackburn. And my dad needed a young centre-half. He didn't have anyone in the ranks, really. There was a few things going on at Blackburn that were a little bit political. My dad's assistant manager, Mark Bowen, who he had a fallout with at Birmingham, he came to Blackburn as assistant. I was sent out on loan straight away when he came in. And it was just a little bit of an awkward situation. So I stayed out on loan, and when my dad became aware of the Robbie Savage interest and Robbie wanted to go, he went one way and he said, throw Alex in as part of the deal. That happened. But I stayed out on loan. Went to Sheffield Wednesday, obviously got promoted, as I said. And that's when, just as I was coming to the end of that loan spell, I was due to go back to Birmingham. It was something that I had to do because they were my parent club now, but I'd been technically a Birmingham player for a few months, but I was a little bit uneasy about going and playing for my dad at the time because I hadn't really proved myself. Birmingham were a big club at the time in the Premier League, and it was one of them where the nepotism chants and all the rest of it. So I went back for pre-season, played a couple of games, and then the Ipswich thing came about, and my dad called me in one day, and I'd actually had a couple of good games for Birmingham. And the supporters actually took to me quite well. But I remember him pulling me in and saying, listen, I've had a call from Ipswich. I know from being down at Norwich, where I started my career, this was my dad talking. I think it'll be a good opportunity for you to go down there, be your own man, big club. And we know from living down in East Anglia that I think you'll enjoy it. So I says, okay. I says, well, let me go and speak to Jim. And that's what I did. Got my bags packed, went down the A14, and that was it, really. As soon as I went, I stayed down there for the best part of 5 years, and it was arguably one of the happiest, best times of my career.
What were your first thoughts when you obviously arrived at Ipswich and you were in negotiations with the club?
I remember driving to the ground thinking, wow, big. I've never been before. I remember thinking, big club, lovely trading ground, nice big stadium where you could sense the history of the place. And I'd signed a few days before the start of the season, I think it was, or maybe like a week before. I got put in a hotel, and I remember my mum came down, stayed with me for a couple of days, and Bobby Robson took me out for dinner the night before my debut.
Wow.
With his wife, and I took my mum along with me, and the four of us went out for dinner. And I left my mum there. With my mum, we knew them anyway because obviously the football connection. So I left my mum with Bobby and Lady Elsie, and we went out for dinner. And then I made my debut the next day, and it was looking back, really, really special times for myself, and ones that I look back on with fond memories. When
you were signing for the club, did Jim have to sell it to you? And if he did or he didn't, what did he say to you when he was signing you?
He just said, come and enjoy it. You're my first signing. Jim was obviously a very good player for Ipswich, and he seemed quite a nice fella. And had a really nice feel for the place straight away. The training ground, good people like Brian Clew, Steve Foley, people like that were around the club at the time. Charlie Woods, really, really good people, good footballing people. The chairman, Mr. Sheepshanks, and it was a good group of lads as well. So I just remember that first game really against Crystal Palace. The first game, I don't think the result was very good. I think we got beat.
Lost 2-1, yeah.
2-1, yeah. But I remember coming away from the game, the ground that day, thinking, as Jim said, there'll be a couple of improvements to the squad, but when there is, this will be a really good team to play for. And I wasn't wrong. It was great times. Did
Sir Bobby say anything during the meal that maybe set you up for the time at Ipswich, or lay some nerves to rest, or did he have any wisdom?
He didn't lay any nerves to rest, because obviously I was just looking forward to pulling on the jersey and getting up and running. But what he did say, I remember it clearly, was you could see that his bond with Ipswich and how he had such a great rapport with the club, and how highly he felt for the club. And he said, you're joining a really good club, and he wasn't wrong. It was a great club, and as I say, one that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and obviously Jim is an absolute legend at Ipswich. He was then, he is now. Looking back on the debut, did he impart any wisdom before or after the game? And what's it like as a player when you're told there'll be improvements to a squad? Obviously you're brand new, so your place is a little bit more maybe assured than others, but you've been in dressing rooms, no doubt, where you've heard that. What is that like as a player hearing those words? Unsettling, exciting?
For me at the time, obviously if you're a new signing and you hear there's going to be new signings coming in, and they've got they want to obviously try and get as high up the league as possible. That was the remit at the time. And Jim did. I think when you look back, Jim did a really good job. I mean, he built a couple of really good teams, and I think, to be honest, Jim, looking back, a lot of people knew what Jim was like because he'd been a player there, as I said, and he was a little bit hot-headed. But everyone knew what he was like as a character at Ipswich. Before I got there, the lads used to say to me sometimes, just take him with a pinch of salt sometimes, rant and rave, and he'll go berserk, but he's all right, really. And he was great with me. He gave me a few rollickins, I have to say, and pinned me up against a wall a few times where I look back at things when I was young, and I could have handled that situation better, but sometimes when you're young, you don't handle things as well as what you would do with experience on your side. But on the whole, Jim was great with me, I have to say. He played me every week, more or less, and I pay him a huge debt because he gave me my real chance, in my opinion, with first team football on a regular basis for a big club like Ipswich. So I owe him a lot.
Does any one situation jump out when you look back in terms of being pinned up against the wall where you think, actually, I probably deserve that?
Yeah, there was a couple. I used to get some stupid red cards and yellow cards. I was a bit inexperienced at the time and used to fly into things where, as I got a little bit older, I kind of mellowed a little bit. But there was one day down at Plymouth where I made a stupid tackle on the byline, and I was on a yellow card. I brought down the lad Ebanks Blake, and we were winning 1-0 at the time. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to be sent off. There was about 10 minutes to play. And he took me off. He took me off because he thought I was going to get sent off. Thankfully, the referee just gave me a warning. He said, right, you're on a yellow card. Any more of those and you're off. So I was like, thanks, ref. I thought you were going to send me off, but thanks very much. I turned around to go and face the free kick. They were going to lump it in our box. And I turned around and there he was with my number up. Come off, you're going to get sent off. And he took me off. I remember being fuming, and Fabian Wilness came on, and we ended up losing the game, actually, 2-1. So Jim had steam coming out of his ears. I've gone in the dressing room. We had a big argument, something along the lines of, what the hell did you take me off for? And blah, blah, blah. And we had a big argument that day. But the one thing I will say about Jim, you could have a big argument with him and then 2 days later he'd be absolutely fine with you, as long as you didn't overstep the mark. And if you did say things where you were out of order and you apologised, he would take it. He was a real man's man in that sense. And it was a good job he was like that, because a lot of managers might have just cast me aside and got rid of me. But he always stuck with me. And as I say, I owe him a huge amount of debt for the way he treated me as a young player.
So second season, finishing 8th, only a point off the playoffs, and the third season was 9th. The third season was a period of change for the club. What was it like playing at that time with players such as Ivan Campo, Giovanni Dos Santos?
Well, we brought in quite a lot of good players over the period I was there, and one of the biggest regrets in my career was not getting Ipswich where I believe we should have got to. That, looking back then, was to the Premier League.
Why was
we had
that?
the players to do it.
What held it back?
Honestly, if I could tell you, I honestly do not know. We went through a season where, I can't remember if it was the second or my third season, where we won every game at home, more or less. Our home record was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But then we couldn't pick points up on the road for some bizarre reason. Don't know whether it was a bit of inexperience or lack of know-how, how to see games out, that we missed in the squad, really. But I don't really know what the reasons were. But I remember looking back at the team that we had, and we had some really, really good players. And as I say, we just missed out on the playoffs a couple of times. And I look back and think it's a shame, because we had all the makings to really get in them playoff spots, and the whole club would have deserved that at the time, because, as I say, it was a really good outfit.
When we had Alan Lee on the podcast a month or so ago, we spoke about that season, that fairy tale season where the home form was so good and the away form not so good, in fact, probably pretty terrible. Alan said at the time he felt there was a lack of desire to change the approach away from home, and how a couple of senior players did say, should we try and change it up away? Were you one of those senior players? Did you feel the same looking back? Do you still think that?
I wouldn't have said I was a senior player at the time, but I'd like to think I was one of the main players. But I think Alan might have a point there. We should have changed the way we played or whatever. But Jim had a philosophy where he believed the game should be played the Ipswich way, really, an attractive way, an attacking way. You get the ball down and pass it. That was always the remit whenever I first went to Ipswich. And he never really tried to go away from that. We were entertaining at home. I remember we beat Bristol City one day. I think it was
6-0, highest score that season.
6-0, and that game epitomised how we were at home. And I reckon Jim and Brian Clew and people like that probably went away from it thinking, how can we play that well at home? And then we go away and we're a totally different team. And I can imagine that he didn't want to try and change it too much, because our home form was that good. He didn't really want to change the way we played because we were that good at home. It was just a case of replicating the performance on the road. So it was a difficult one. And yeah, we could have probably went to a more of a defensive formation. And as I say, like what I went to when I was at Hull, my dad stuck me in midfield a couple of occasions where we kind of shut up shop and tried to frustrate the opponents. Looking back, maybe we could have done something like that, but it was a bit of a strange one, really.
And looking back on that time, obviously the third season saw a couple of players come in, Macaulay, Thatcher, Campo. Professionally, what was that like for you? Were you thinking, wait on, there's a few defenders coming in here, or were you excited with the prospect of playing with players such as Campo and Thatcher and Macaulay?
I was always excited. I mean, didn't really know much about Gaz at the time when he came in, but I just seen him. I think Jason DeVos was coming to the end, who'd been obviously a good servant for Ipswich. He was the captain and he needed replacing, and Gaz came in. Took a little bit of time to bed into the team and the way we were, but I remember when Gaz come in and Ben Thatcher and Campo, I remember thinking, these are good experienced players, maybe this is what we needed. And unfortunately, it didn't really improve the team bringing those players in. It kind of just kept us at the same level. I think he said we finished 8th and 9th, and we just missed out again. So it was disappointing, really. But good players, good lads as well. And obviously Gaz went on to have a really, really good career. Ivan and Snatch were coming to the end of their careers back then. But Gaz went on and did really well when he left and went to West Brom. Obviously, he had an excellent time there. So
yeah,
really good player, and he was a good servant for Ipswich as well.
And as you say, great players, but didn't make the step. Was there anything you feel at the time holding the club back from making the step? And because the squad was there, as you say.
I don't really know. It's hard to put a finger on it. It was, and one thing that you have to say, the competition in the league was very strong and fierce at the time. There were some good teams, good players everywhere. So it was difficult to try and get out of the league, I have to say. But I don't know what it was, whether it was just that lack of cutting edge in front of goal, bit of creativity from wide areas. I'm not so sure, but that little bit of missing cog that we needed, we didn't quite have it to get into them playoffs. And yeah, it was frustrating, but looking back from where Ipswich are now, you probably appreciated how much of a good team that we did have, and it was just a shame we couldn't add them maybe one or two players that could have been the difference for us.
Yeah. Two things stick out from Jim's time as a fan, and I did ask Alan about this. First of all, the Amsterdam trip with the players. Were you one of the lucky few that made the trip?
No, I didn't. But you know what? I was due to go on it, and I was going to go. But for some reason, it wasn't really like me. I didn't end up going on it. I can't remember what happened, but I think I ended up coming back to Manchester for that weekend because we had a couple of days off. But no, thankfully I missed out, and I was one of the lucky ones, because remember when it all blew up, I thought, oh, Jesus, I was literally this far from going with the lads. and I backed out at the last minute, so I was one of the lucky ones. But yeah, I remember it. It was trouble hit the fan.
Come on, there's a story there. Come on.
There wasn't really a story to it. I just remember being in the dressing room, and we had such funny times. Honestly, we were all young. We had good lads: Gavin Williams, Gary Roberts, Billy Clark. There was a good nucleus of us. Remember, Nobes came from West Ham on loan. He was a great lad as well. Fitted in with us all. We all lived in apartments all around the docks area in Ipswich, and we were always together. People in the town would have always seen us around, whether we went out or remember the nightclub on the what was the nightclub on the industrial park around the back of the ground called?
That was called Liquid, Unit 18. There's
Liquid. We were always in there thinking we were the dogs, giving it the big licks, and people probably looked at us and thought, "Who the hell do this lot think they are?" You know, it was a really, really great times, and there was so many instances where Jim used to get us in. And I remember one day he got us in the office, and I think it was me, Gaz, and Billy Clark, and he was like, "Where were you last night?" And we were like, "Nowhere." Remember Gary Roberts? No, we weren't anywhere. Gaffer and Billy was the same. We were all shaking our heads, and he had a laptop on his desk. He said, "Well, can you explain this picture then?" And he turned his laptop round, and there we were, the three of us. We'd had a picture, you know, like what they used to put on the websites, the pictures. With a few drinks and draped around. I think there was a couple of girls in the photo and all that. And he'd give us a clip round the ear and booted us out the office. And there was always things like that happening, but really, really good time.
What was it like in the dressing room when the lads came back from Holland and Jim was a bit, hot-headed about it? Was it head down? I wasn't there, wasn't me.
I think I think it was. We were all in it together, really, like any team should be. I remember them coming back, and you're testing my memory here because it was such a long time ago. But I remember he wasn't happy. And the lads who obviously went on the trip got in a bit of trouble. I think they got fined. And then...
What is the best Jim story you've got? As in, like, from that time, if you look back, what is the best one you can pull out and you think, geez.
There was one where we played Charlton away, and he left. I was sulking. Whenever he used to leave me out, I used to take it terribly. And he left me out. He didn't play me. So he announced the team on the Friday, and I wasn't happy. And this kind of summed up the relationship with me and Jim. And I jumped on the team bus. We go down to Charlton. We arrived at the hotel on the Friday night. I remember being fuming, and I thought, no, I'm not going to pre-match meal. I'm not hungry, and I just don't want to sit and try and act all nicey with people because I'm really upset about not playing tomorrow. So I sat in the room in a sulk, just watching telly, which is the wrong way to be, by the way. This is what I mean by looking back when you're young and you do stupid things. When he took that opportunity to play away on us from a Saturday afternoon, I just couldn't handle it back then. It used to drive me insane. So it got to about 9 o'clock and I was starving because I'd missed pre-match. So I rang down and I ordered a club sandwich. So I'm waiting for the club sandwich to come, and anyway, I was starving. I remember knock at the door, and I jumped up, opened the door, and there was Jim holding the club sandwich. And he was like, yeah, don't want to come for pre-match meal with the rest of us, do you not? I was like, no, I don't, because you're not playing me tomorrow. And a few words were said again. And he threw the club sandwich at me. I had mayonnaise and chips and everything all over me. He said, oh, go on then, you big baby, or whatever. He was right, really, looking back. But yeah, that was a funny instance.
Brilliant. So Jim leaves. Were you shocked when Jim left?
I was, yeah, because obviously he was a good captain for the club, and I felt as if he did a good job. Couldn't quite get us in that Premier League in the playoff spots, but I think on the whole he did a very good job, and it was sad to see him leave.
When Roy Keane was announced, did you know Roy Keane from your dad, from your United days?
Yeah, I knew Roy well. He was a hero of mine growing up, I have to say. And at the time I had a little bit of interest from clubs. I'd just broken into the Ireland squad. I was doing quite well for Ipswich, and I had a couple of interests for a couple of Premier League clubs, actually, looking back. And I'd ran my contract down. I was on a Bosman at the end of the season, just when Jim was about to leave. And then it was announced that Roy was coming in for the last couple of games of the season. And I remember him pulling me in on one of his first, I think it was his first couple of weeks, and said, what's the situation with your contract? I said, well, to be honest, Roy, I've got a couple of things happening, blah, blah, blah. And I had it in my head that I was going to leave at the time. And when he came in, he was obviously my hero, Man United fan growing up. It totally swung my mind. And I had my hero sitting in front of me saying, what do you want to stay? And we thrashed out a contract, and I ended up staying. He made me captain. I remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. Obviously, Roy Keane's our manager. And again, like we touched on before, he's going to sign a few players, and this is it. We're going to really push for promotion, and I'll be right at the heart of it. And hopefully, as captain, we can go on and achieve great things. And unfortunately, that didn't materialise.
So having been made captain, it wasn't long before you were then out on loan at Leicester. So yeah. What happened really from being sat in front of Roy and being told, you know, we want this, we want that, to then find yourself in Leicester?
It was strange times, really. And looking back, the way Roy was at Ipswich, I think how he treated me really summed up his time as Ipswich manager. I think there was too many changes. I think he came in like a raging bull and did too much too quick, in my opinion. I think under Jim's era, it was a very family-orientated club. You had the old players coming in. He built a decent team, and you could you got that set. Like people like walking around the training ground. They just pop in for lunch, and Milt's like the player liaison guy, and there was just constant people in and out of the training ground, and it gave it that feel. Big Wolf, who everyone knows down in Ipswich, walking about. People like that were always around, and it gave it that real sense of a family club. And then when Roy came, he changed all of it. There was finger recognition on the training ground. People couldn't get in, and in his mind, he probably made it more professional, and he did in a lot of ways, I have to say. But I think there was just a lot of change behind the scenes and with the playing staff as well. He chopped and changed everything. Like, he brought in a lot of players, didn't necessarily make us any better, spent a lot of money. And I remember we were playing against Doncaster, and I nicked my groin as captain. And I think we came back and drew that game. We hadn't started the season well.
No.
And then we had Newcastle at home. It was the famous Bobby Robson game. It's like a tribute to Bobby, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we got beat heavily on the day. And my groin wasn't right. And I knew from the first 10, 15 minutes of the game that I wasn't right. And ultimately, my groin went in the end. And had to come off when we were getting beat 2-0 at the time. And I remember him saying to me after the game, captain of mine, that injury better be serious, because no captain of mine comes off the pitch 2-0 down. And it was. I ended up being out for about 8 weeks with it. It was a bad groin strain. I tore the muscle.
Ouch.
And then I came back into the team, And he pulled me in his office and said, right, you're going back into the team tomorrow. We were playing Leicester. It was my first game back away at their stadium. But I'm still not very happy the way you came off. So you're not going to be captain, which really, really disappointed me. I thought, bloody hell, everyone gets injured, and you obviously took the captaincy off me because you didn't think I should have come off in a game where I was injured. So didn't really understand the concept of why he'd done it. Made Gaz captain or John Walters, but he kind of flitted amongst 2 or 3 of us, which again was his own. Should have named a captain and stuck with it. Really, I don't think you can really chop and change your captains. It doesn't send a good message out to the team. But that's kind of the way it was. It was kind of everything was just erratic with everything. And when I got back in the team, I think I played okay that day. Then I got injured again. Did the same thing on the other side, same injury, but my left side. I obviously had a weakness somewhere. Tore my groin again, and I was out for another 4 or 5 weeks. I got myself back fit, played a couple of games, must have done okay, and then had the opportunity to go to Leicester because they were fighting to get into the playoffs. They were actually in the playoffs, and we were probably around about just below mid-table, nothing really to play for. And I asked Roy if I could go and experience playing in the playoffs with Leicester and on loan and see what it was like. And again, it was a good experience, but a sad time really, because it was a club that I didn't really want to leave, but it was a good opportunity in the same time to go to Leicester.
Yeah, and obviously we've all probably heard the famous John Walters towel with Roy Keane, where he wanted to leave to Stoke and Roy offered him out, and John starts to undress. Was there any of that when you were there with Roy? Did you ever feel like Roy was that type of manager and would make life extremely difficult for you or anybody else?
No, it really made it difficult for me. He was, I have to say, Roy was a very, very straight up guy, as you can imagine. He was, a spade was a spade with him. He used to tell you exactly what was on his mind, which had its advantages and disadvantages looking back. Certain people could handle it, certain people couldn't. And I'm sure he would probably be the first man to admit himself he might have handled things a little bit differently if he had his time again. However, I went to Leicester. We had the playoff run, and then I came back for pre-season. And Roy called me in the first couple of days, the first few days. I had a couple of clubs interested. I had Sheffield United, I had Leeds, and there was a question mark whether Leicester were going to take me back or not. So I went back, and Roy pulled me in, and I remember he pulled me in, and he says, "Listen, I watched you when you went to Leicester. Obviously, you were back fit. You played a few games. You obviously got in the playoffs. It's a big season ahead. I just want you to knuckle down, and you're part of my plan. So just get on with it." So I remember thinking, "Okay, fine." Came out the dressing room, walked down the corridor, and there was a notice on the dressing room door, and it was the squad numbers for that season. And I'd had my number 5 jersey took off me, and I was number 36. I remember thinking, very, very bizarre. Wonder how he would have been if Alex Ferguson took the number 16 jersey off him after 4 or 5 years at the club, which kind of sent my head into a bit of a twizz. And then a couple of days after that, it was confirmed that Sheffield United and Leeds were interested in me. And I went in and knocked on his door and asked to leave. Yeah. And that was my Ipswich days that had come to an end, really, which was disappointing. But on the flip side of that, it was a time where I'd had great times, but I just felt the way the club was at the time, and it was the right time to move on. And that was my Ipswich story come to an end.
And seeing those squad numbers, did you know then? Did you really, think, do you know what, I might be in his plans, but I might be 4th choice in his plans, or was it?
Yeah. But you never knew with Roy though, because, as I say, he was that erratic with some of the things he did, and you could never call the decision that he was going to make. You could never call the team selection. That's probably why the Ipswich that he had, the team that he had, never really reached its potential and never got anywhere near changing, because he did spend quite a lot of Marcus Evans' money. He probably gave him a big budget, and the players that he brought in didn't really do it, really, if I'm being brutally honest. So it was a weird one where I could have thought to myself, I might not be in his plans, but you would never have known with Roy. I could have been playing with number 36 on the back.
Yeah.
That was the case. He might have just been doing it in a way to give me a kick up the backside. I don't really know or understand why he did that. But
And
it was a bit strange.
And for those at home, so you hear of interest, do you hear interest through your agent or do you read it in the newspaper? For those at home that perhaps don't know how the inner workings of a transfer work at professional level, how did you hear of the interest elsewhere?
An agent rang me and told me of the interest, and then I think Roy pulled me in and said, listen, we've had a bid from Sheffield United. If you want to go and speak to them, you can. I went up to Sheffield, spoke to them, and I was actually in Sheffield United's training ground having talks, and that's when Ken Bates rang me, who was the chairman of Leeds at the time. And they just got promoted to the Championship. I felt as if it was a good challenge going to Leeds, big club.
Massive, yeah.
Went across there, was really impressed by the training ground and what have you, and I ended up moving on.
Absolutely. Now, I know time's pushing on, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. Okay, I appreciate your child needs their education.
No.
What was it like moving to a club like Leeds? What was there instant pressure? Did you know the expectations?
Yeah, I did know the expectations, and again, a bit like the Ipswich scenario, we had a really, really good team. Obviously, we had Kasper in goal. We had the likes of Robert Snodgrasses, Max Gradle, Becchio, Johnny Howson, Bradley Johnson. We had a really, really, the nucleus of a really, really good team. And we were in the top six for a large chunk of that first season that I was there. But unfortunately, the club was just in turmoil behind the scenes. There was chopping and changing. And I think sometimes when there's so much going on around the club, it really can affect the players when there's always players ins and outs and there's not a settled team. And that was the case when I was at Leeds. There was a constant revolving door of players in and out all the time. And it was just a really unsettled period. And I was only there for 2 seasons. And then I went on and left and joined up with my dad again. And I felt comfortable doing that, going to Hull. Because I felt as if I'd proven myself as a Championship player by then. And looking back now, probably Hull and Ipswich were the 2 major chapters in my career that I enjoyed the most. I played my most football for both clubs, and I look back at both clubs with real high regard and good memories on the whole.
And it's where I want to finish really with Hull, because you fulfil every kid's dream. Obviously, Ipswich Town are a club that's got success in the FA Cup. It's every kid's dream to play in the FA Cup. You had an FA Cup final with Hull. Talk us through that final. The weeks leading up to it. Were you nervous? Extra nervous?
It was without a shadow of a doubt the highlight of my career in terms of an occasion. It was something like I'd never experienced before. Really, playing Arsenal at Wembley, the whole razzmatazz of leading to an FA Cup final. The fittings of the suits and I remember the day before we went down to Wembley, we had a private jet taking us down to London, and all the Humberside fire engines had lined up along the runway. Wow. And made like a play with the fire hoses, and we flew under them and off we went. And just things like that where you look back and think, wow, it was an amazing time. And then we arrived and obviously woke up the morning of the game at the Grove Hotel, and there was the helicopters flying. I remember looking out the window and there was helicopters everywhere flying around, sky cameras, and I remember thinking, big occasion this today. And then you arrive at Wembley and go down Wembley Way and you see all the supporters and all the amber and black flags. It was just a fantastic occasion. The game started and we started like a house on fire, went 2-0 up and we were flying in the game. And it was I had a good game at the time, and that bloody groin injury that I told you about, what I did at Ipswich, it went on me on about 80 minutes. I stepped over somebody who fell in front of me in the 18-yard box, and something popped in my groin. And I hadn't really felt anything like it since that day when I did it playing for Roy Keane against Newcastle. And exactly the same injury. And unfortunately I had to come off, but we were 2-1 up at the time, and probably one of the biggest regrets of my career, really, having to come off in an FA Cup final was a really, really difficult pill to swallow. But I was playing well. That's one thing I can take out of the game. I was playing well that day, and it was a fabulous occasion and one that I'll always look back on with fond memories.
Obviously you flew out the traps 2-0 up at 2-1 at half time. What did Steve say to you all at half time? What were the words at half time?
just hang on in the game. And we started the second half quite comfortably. And I actually felt really comfortable. I had my eye in, really. I was playing against Olivier Giroud. And I felt like I had a better of him on the day. Everything that came in the box, I seemed to get my head on it. Everything was coming in my areas. Every tackle that was going into kind of fell my way. I was just having one of those days where I just felt as if it was really good. And players will tell you this, when you're having a good game and you feel like you've got your eye in, you feel like you're invincible, really, especially as a defender.
Yeah,
I was having one of those days, and little did I know that was going to happen, where my groin was going to go. It was just such a disappointment.
There's something about yourself coming off and teams losing. Plymouth, here, there seems to be a story developing.
No, I don't know if it was all about me coming off, but it was obviously sometimes things happen where you come off and you end up losing, but that was the case, unfortunately, on that day.
Is that final still something yourself and your dad look back on and talk about over a Sunday roast, where, you know, if one thing had gone another way, or if a ball had fallen here, or? Yeah,
of course. We always talk about it, and it bugs me to this day. Paul McShane came on and replaced me, and my job in the team that day, the tactic defending corners, was I was stood right in front of our goalkeeper, and anything that came in my area, I'd go and win. And Paul McShane, I don't know if he got given the instruction, or he just didn't listen, or he drifted out of that area exactly where I would have been stood, and that was the equalising goal just before full time, where it took it to extra time, where the ball was nodded down into that 6-yard box, and Paul had drifted out of that area. I think it was Koscielny who swiveled and put it in, and
yeah.
I remember thinking on the bench, Jesus, that's exactly where I would have been stood. I would have cleared it, and it's something that I'll look back on. And obviously, it was really disappointing. And I also look back at the header that I had cleared off the line from Kieran Gibbs to make it 3-0. That would have been
game over. Yeah,
game over. 3-0, I think. But I was disappointing. But on the whole, it was a fantastic occasion.
Yeah. Now, I spoke to Titus Bramble. Obviously, you may know, ex-Premier League player. He told me who the hardest opponent he'd ever played against was. Now, before I tell you who he said, who was your hardest opponent that you'd ever played against? It could be Championship, Premier League, International, whatever. But who did you know, oh no, today's going to be a really tough day?
I was fortunate enough when I left Ipswich that I think I was a better player. I think I did well at Ipswich, but when I went to Hull, I think the experience that I'd had at Ipswich and Leeds kind of made me, when I was at Hull, I was in my peak years, really.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to play in the Premier League, and I wasn't as erratic and rash as what I was when I first went to Ipswich, but I was getting booked and sent off all the time. I kind of knew
Stephen Bywater.
Yeah, exactly. None of them I really happened. When I got a little bit older and I mellowed a little bit. So obviously I had a little period where I was in the Premier League and played against some fantastic players. Suarez was a great opponent. Diego Costa, Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney. Wow. There's so many really top players. It would be really difficult to pick one. But
Titus said it was Emil Heskey, because you always knew coming off the field that you'd been more or less in an absolute boxing fight, because he was strong, he was physical, and that which really surprised me. Obviously, as you just mentioned there, some great names. He's played against some great names. But yes, he said Emil Heskey, because
the best player I ever played. Well, I wouldn't say he's the best player I played against, but he would be right up there. Who gave me a torrid one afternoon was Thierry Henry when he was at Arsenal. I remember playing against Arsenal when I was at Birmingham before I came to Ipswich. Just before I came to Ipswich, actually, this was. And I remember just how big and how strong and how powerful and how quick he was. He was an exceptional player. And I'd probably say on that afternoon, it was probably him who gave me a lesson, really, into thinking, Jesus, I'm miles off it. That's how it made me feel.
Brilliant. So, now, if you don't mind, I've just got quick teammates, 5 minutes, and then I'll let you go. And I appreciate your time, and hopefully do a more in-depth podcast with you when we can speak face-to-face and COVID-19 has retreated. But your best roommate throughout your career?
Best roommate throughout my career, I would have to say Gary Roberts, when I was at Ipswich,
Okay.
He was probably someone I've always remained close with, and we had some laughs together. So yeah, probably Gaz.
Any particular reason why? Was he a prankster, or were you the prankster?
Yeah, we just clashed straight away. We were total opposites. I had a bit of OCD. I was tidy. He would be the kind to just have a crisp pack of crisps and throw the packet on the floor. Kind of one of them, really. So I was always picking up after him, and in the end, because he knew I was a tidy freak, he used to play on it. He used to wind me up, and it used to really make him laugh, just leaving something on the side or whatever. And he'd see me picking it up. So we used to have a laugh with him.
Worst roommate?
Gary Roberts.
Robert.
For that reason.
Best dressed?
Ben Thatcher, when I was at Ipswich, was a great dresser, really immaculate, took pride in his appearance. Tommy Miller was a good dresser. He had a bit of OCD about him. Ipswich, bit of an Ipswich legend as well. So
yeah.
Probably one of those two.
I'm not sure I want to ask this, but very quickly, why snatch for Ben Thatcher? I'm not sure I want to know, but
I don't really know why it was Snatch. It kind of with the film Snatch was out around about the time where he was a bit of a Cockney geezer. He used to give it the old bit of a wide boy. So yeah, probably just I don't know. I think it's followed him throughout his career, really.
Best trainer?
Oh, best trainer. Who would I go? Play with some good players and some good trainers. I'll go Ipswich. Best trainer. David Norris was a good trainer. Always gave his really good, honest working lad. Worked his socks off. So during my time at Ipswich, I'd probably say Dave Norris was up there.
If you had to compare him to Robert Corrin, because in preparation to this video, I did watch a similar sort of thing you did for the whole YouTube.
Yeah, Robert Corrin at Hull was... I used to look up to Rob because he was an older player and he was just so fit and looked after himself impeccably. So I said at Hull, Robert Corrin, because he treated every day like it was his last. And obviously you have good trainers that stick in your mind. I'll tell you who was a good trainer at Ipswich, who was the bit of the opposite, really. If he could have replicated his form from training into games, I think he'd have had probably a better career than he had, was the lad Bowditch. Dean Bowditch.
Really? Dean Bowditch, yeah.
Dean Bowditch. I remember when I first went to Ipswich thinking, wow, who's this kid in training? He was very, very good. Good ability. Strong, quick. But he didn't quite replicate his training into games, unfortunately, for him. But he had really, really a lot of talent. Worst trainer? Worst trainer. Do you know what? I'm going to throw myself in there as a bad trainer. I was never a good trainer through.
Really?
No, I wasn't a good trainer. I used to try, but I used to think I was pretty much the opposite in terms of I didn't really replicate how I played on a Saturday. I needed a crowd. I needed an occasion. So the feel for a proper match day was, I'd like to think, where you got the best out of me. I never really was a trainer. I used to get out of training what I needed to, but ultimately it was always in preparation for a game. Most skillful? Ipswich time, definitely Giovanni Dos Santos. Really, really skillful lad, good player. Lots of bags of tricks, bags of ability. So yeah, I'd probably go Gio. What was your first thought when you saw Giovanni walk onto the training pitch? Did he skin somebody? Did he knock it round somebody? Did you just stand there and go, "Oh my days"? Yeah, a little bit like that. He was. Remember when he first came, he was just had wonderful ability. Really, he had a lovely centre of gravity, balance. Both feet could go past people. Some people have just got that. He had that kind of Latin kind of, bit like a Ronaldinho roll swag about him, where he was. He just had that natural ability where he could drift past people, and yeah, really good player. Mr. Vane? Tommy Miller, without a shadow of a doubt, at Ipswich. He was very always in front of the mirror, immaculate, always doing his hair and polishing shoes, and he was just immaculate all the time, Tommy, but definitely the vainest. Used to think he was a bit of a looker as well, Tommy, but great lad. Really, 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 really great lad. Best manager? Best manager in my career or at Ipswich? In my career.
Now, don't do a cop out on me here. Don't do a cop out on me here.
I'm not going to say my dad. Obviously, but I had great times with my dad at Hull. I really enjoyed that period where we had a really successful time. But if I was going to pick my best manager, I would have to say, and I don't know if it was because of the circumstance where I was in, where I'd left Ipswich and everything was with Roy Keane was just really, there was a lot of arguments and a lot of tension, and people were walking on eggshells around him at the club at the time, and there was always changing of the team, and it was just a really unsettled time. And then I went to Leicester with Nigel Pearson, who was the complete opposite, really calm, just nice fella, just never got too high with his emotions or low with it. He was just an even keel. So I'd probably say Nigel Pearson really impressed me. And you can see now he's gone to Watford and done very well there and had a huge impact on them.
Were you surprised?
Was I surprised when he went to Watford?
No. Were you surprised when the results started to turn at Watford? Because many people saw that appointment and were shocked. No, you were. Yeah.
No, mate, I'm good pals with Tom Cleverley, who's at Watford, and even though I only worked with Nigel for a couple of months, he left a real big impact on me because I remember thinking he was a really, really good manager, good man, and he just had a natural way of getting the best out of people and putting an arm around you, made you feel 10 feet tall. And when he went to Watford, I thought it'd be a good appointment, that, because instantly the lads are going to take to him and like him, and they've got some good players at Watford as well. So I just thought that could be a good match for them. And I said to Klebs when he went there, I said, you'll enjoy working with Nigel, he's a really good guy. After a few weeks, he messaged me and said, you weren't wrong, and the results started picking up for them, and didn't surprise me at all. Really, really good manager.
Yeah, likewise. I did see a debate on the show that they weren't too keen. Best captain?
Best captain that I had in my career? Got some good captains. Who would I say is my best captain? Jason DeVos was a good captain, I have to say. I played centre half alongside him, and we had a decent partnership. But in terms of organising things, looking back and being a leader in the dressing room, he really grabbed the ball by the horns. He was a big help to Jim Magilton at the time. And looking back, I'd probably have to say Jason.
And when you're made captain, is that the sort of person you remember back to and you think, I'm going to try and model myself around that sort of thing I've seen? Or perhaps an earlier captain, Roy Keane at United? Or when you're made captain, who were you trying to bring the best qualities out of in yourself?
I never tried to copy anybody, really. I was captain for Ipswich for a little while, and looking back, I was probably a little bit young to be made captain, if the truth be known. But I just tried to be my own person. I definitely didn't try to be like Jason. I definitely didn't try and be like anybody else. I just tried to be, I think when you try and copy people and try and be something that you're not, you'll come a cropper, really. I just tried to be my own person and tried to lead by example the best I could. I think I would have been more of a captain the older I got, because obviously you change as you get older, you become a little bit more mellow, and that little bit of experience helps you as well. So I just tried to be my own person, really.
And what's next for Alex? Player, coach, manager? Where do you see yourself going next 12 months, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, I haven't closed the book on playing. Just had a little stint at Kilmarnock for a year where I really enjoyed it. But I've come home now and closer to the family because my wife and kids were here. So if I can get something a little bit closer to home, I would like to try and keep playing. But everything with this lockdown has kind of thrown everything into the air, really. I don't really know what's going to be next for me. I'm at that crossroads of my life where I would like to go into management. I'd like to go into coaching if I can. However, it's just all about opportunity, and whether I get that opportunity, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, fingers crossed, and good luck to you. And hopefully, once this COVID-19's gone, we can sit down and you'll grant me an audience with you, and we can sit down and do a more in-depth look at your career and where you're going and what's happening and how you got there. But thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
And I look forward to meeting you in person.
Good stuff. Thanks for giving me the call, and I'll stay safe, and I'll see you soon.
No, thank you. And to all those at home, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Thank you.